I never believed in love at first sight. But that night, under the kind of rain that felt like the sky was grieving, I saw him. He was standing beside his car, soaked, trembling, blood on the broken glass, his eyes hollow like someone who had just lost his place in the world. The headlights, they said. He didn't turn them on, as if that justified what they did to him. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't need to, because when I saw the bruises on his body and the ones behind his silence, I knew. Some pain doesn't bleed. Some pain just stares at the road and wonders, was I ever safe here to begin with? He used to believe in America. The long highways, the freedom, the dream they keep promising if you just work hard enough. He had a crumpled map in his glove box and a heart too soft for this world. He wasn't running from anything. He was chasing something. Something beautiful. And then, a siren, a shout, a shattered window. And everything he believed in shattered too. But this story isn't about a black man who got beat by the system. It's about survival. About losing your dream and trying to piece it back together with shaking hands. About a man learning to breathe again, and a woman learning to love him even when he didn't think he deserved to be seen. So stay. Watch. Because the road didn't end that night. It just changed direction. And maybe, just maybe, he's still out there, driving towards something real. Subscribe to John's Stories channel for more beautiful and emotional journeys like this. New stories every day, just for you.
It had rained for hours that day. Not the gentle kind that kisses the windows and makes lovers hold hands tighter, but the kind that felt like the sky had been holding back grief for weeks and finally let go. Malik drove on, the windshield wipers protesting with every sweep. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel as the road blurred into gray, his headlights flickering across puddles that swallowed the yellow lines. The playlist had long since fallen silent. All he could hear was the engine, the wipers, and his own breathing. There was something about the road that used to calm him. Ever since graduation, he'd taken to it like a pilgrim to sacred ground. State lines, his milestones, truck stops, his chapels. His battered map, covered in scribbled notes and coffee stains, sat folded on the passenger seat like a well-worn gospel. But lately, even the road had begun to feel like a stranger. He hadn't planned to be in this part of Mississippi. A wrong turn somewhere near Memphis had rerouted him through towns that didn't appear on Google Maps. Towns where people stared too long, where gas stations were quiet but full of eyes. And then came the flashing lights. At first, Malik thought it was for someone else, but when the siren blared again, sharp and commanding, his heart skipped. He pulled over slowly, methodically, just as he had been taught since he was old enough to sit behind a steering wheel. Hands visible, no sudden movements. A tall officer approached on the left. Another flanked the right side. Rain streaked down their uniforms like tears unclaimed. "You know why I pulled you over?" the first one asked. Malik shook his head gently. "No, sir. Headlights weren't on. That's a violation, especially in this weather." Malik's voice was calm. "I didn't realize. I can turn them on now if that helps." "Step out of the vehicle." Malik hesitated. Not because he was hiding something, but because he knew in the marrow of his bones that hesitation was often misunderstood as defiance. Still, he cleared his throat. "I'm under 25. In this state, I have the right to request a guardian or legal rep to be present during any escalated stop. I'd like to wait until someone arrives." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence where decisions are made. "You refusing a lawful order?" the second officer asked, voice rising. "No, sir." Malik answered more firmly now, "just exercising my legal right." What happened next blurred into a tangle of shattered glass, shouted commands, and rough hands pulling him into the cold. The road met his face before he could cry out. Rain soaked his clothes, blood mingled with mud. And somewhere between the cuffs and the slam of the squad car door, Malik knew the dream had cracked. He didn't remember arriving at the hospital, only the beeping machines and the fluorescent lights that hummed above him like judgment. The nurses were kind, especially one named Sarah, who whispered prayers into his IV line when she thought he was asleep. His shoulder was dislocated, his ribs bruised, but it was the fear that had sunk its claws deepest. The kind of fear that doesn't scream. It settles, quiet, permanent. He stared at the ceiling for hours, tracing invisible routes in his mind. Memphis to Baton Rouge, Santa Fe to Austin, the Rockies, the Appalachians, the coasts. He had wanted to see it all. But now, when he closed his eyes, he saw nothing but rain and hands. Rain and broken glass. Rain and the look on their faces like he had already been found guilty of something they never named. A week passed before anyone visited. Her name was Emily, a friend of a friend from college who had seen a post online. She brought him fresh socks and a small plant in a ceramic pot shaped like a turtle. "You don't know me," she said gently, "but I know what happened, and I just couldn't not come." He looked at her, pale skin, glasses, a small scar on his wrist, and felt something stir. Not attraction, not even trust, just curiosity. They spoke little that day, but when she left, she placed the crumpled map back into his hand. Someone had salvaged it from the car. Her fingers lingered for a moment on his palm. "You don't have to be done dreaming," she whispered. "You just might have to dream differently." He didn't know what that meant, but he didn't throw the map away. The plant on the windowsill started to bloom the day before Malik was discharged. It was a small thing, 2 tiny leaves unfurling from the turtle-shaped pot like shy hands reaching for sun, but it made him pause. It wasn't much, but it was alive, and that mattered. He hadn't planned to see Emily again, but she came back 3 days in a row, not with pity, not with awkward silences, but with quiet presence. A book one day, a sandwich the next, a story about how she once got lost for 7 hours on a forest trail in Oregon and cried the whole way back. Nobody talks about how terrifying the world can be when it decides you don't belong somewhere, she said, sipping her coffee beside his bed. Malik watched her closely, trying to gauge the difference between kindness and guilt. He'd seen it before, people who felt sorry for the black kid who made the news. But Emily didn't flinch when he spoke about what happened. She didn't interrupt, she just listened. One afternoon, she pulled out a small black notebook and handed it to him. "I thought you might want to write again, or draw, or burn it, your choice." He took it slowly, brushing his fingers over the cover. It wasn't his old journal, the one that got soaked and shredded during the incident, but it felt similar. A blank space waiting to hold something that hadn't yet been named. "What if I don't have anything to say anymore?" he asked. Emily shrugged, gently. "Then you can just let the silence rest on the page." The day Malik left the hospital, the sky was startlingly blue, the kind of blue that felt performative after a storm, too pure, too perfect, like the world trying to convince you it was innocent. Emily offered to drive him to the auto shop, where what was left of his SUV had been towed. They didn't talk much during the ride, just the soft hum of tires on pavement and the occasional flicker of her eyes in the rearview mirror. The SUV sat in a fenced lot, still wet inside from the rain. The passenger window had been crudely taped over with clear plastic. The interior reeked of mildew and old leather, but the map was still there, crumpled, blood-stained, torn at the edges, and somehow that made him feel anchored.
He sat in the car alone for a few minutes while Emily waited outside. Hands on the wheel, seatbelt buckled. His reflection in the rear view stared back at him. Older somehow, heavier around the eyes. He reached over and turned the ignition. The engine stuttered, then roared to life. It was still breathing. So was he.
They drove for a while that afternoon, nowhere in particular, just through sleepy towns and winding country roads. Emily let him choose the music, mostly soft jazz and old soul tracks that sounded like memories. At one point, they pulled over near a sunflower field, the gold spilling across the land like spilled paint. Malik stepped out of the car and stood in the breeze, closing his eyes. Emily joined him, arms crossed, face tilted up toward the sky. "You ever think about leaving?" Malik asked. "Leaving what?" "This country, this place, the weight of it." She was quiet for a moment. "All the time. But I don't know where I'd go, or who I'd be without the fight." Malik nodded. He understood that, the complicated grief of loving a place that doesn't always love you back. "My mama used to say, America's a song with too many verses we weren't invited to sing." Emily smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe it's time we write new verses." At a roadside diner that evening, they sat in a red vinyl booth, sipping lukewarm coffee while the jukebox played something old and sad. A waitress dropped off 2 slices of pie without charging them. "Saw you on the news," she said quietly to Malik, then walked away. He stared at the plate like it might explode. "You okay?" Emily asked, gently. He shook his head. "Sometimes I feel like I'm a headline, not a person." "You're more than that," she said. "Am I?" he whispered, and she didn't answer, because she knew it wasn't a question meant to be solved. Some pain doesn't need solutions, just space.
One night, weeks later, Malik parked his SUV at the edge of a cliff in New Mexico, the stars above him like scattered prayers. Emily lay on the hood beside him, their backs warmed by the lingering heat of the engine. He pointed to a constellation overhead. "Orion," he said. "The hunter." Emily traced the shape with her fingertip in the air. "Do you still feel like the road belongs to you?" she asked softly. He was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," he admitted. "It used to feel like freedom. Now it feels like surveillance, like I'm always being watched, like I could vanish and no one would ask why until it's too late." Emily turned to face him. "But you're still here." "Barely. Still counts." They lay there in silence as a wind rolled across the valley. In the weeks that followed, Malik began filming again, not for content, not for anyone else, just small clips. Wind in the trees, raindrops on the windshield, his hand brushing against a cactus flower. He started writing too. One entry stood out. "I am not my trauma. I am not your projection. I am not the man you feared, nor the one you ignored. I am what remains when silence clears and breath returns. I am still becoming." Emily read it one evening by firelight, tears slipping down her cheeks without a sound. She didn't ask him to explain it. She just folded the page carefully, like a secret worth protecting.
It was late autumn when Malik decided to return to the place where it all began. Not out of vengeance, not even out of closure, just to see if the road still remembered him. Emily didn't ask why. She packed a bag without speaking and rode beside him through towns that still looked at him sideways, past gas stations where he once counted how long it took for suspicion to bloom in a stranger's eyes. She watched him navigate each curve, each detour, as if steering through muscle memory. The SUV groaned in protest now and then, but it moved, and that was enough. Somewhere in rural Mississippi, the rain found them again. It wasn't a storm, not like the first time. This rain came soft and slow, tapping on the windshield like a question left unanswered. Malik kept his hands steady on the wheel, the wipers brushing aside what tried to linger. He pulled over at the same spot, the shoulder of the road where the sirens once screamed, the ditch where his journal had been trampled, the tree where his fear had taken root. It looked ordinary now. The grass had grown back, the mud had dried, the world had gone on like nothing happened, but Malik hadn't. He stepped out of the car and stood in silence. No lights, no noise, just the rain. He closed his eyes and listened, not to the past, but to the breath in his chest, steady, present, his own. "I thought I'd feel something," he said. Emily stood beside him. "And do you?" Malik paused. "No. And that might be the point." Later that night, they found a motel with flickering neon and carpet that smelled like dust, the kind of place where lost people go to be still. Malik sat at the desk, staring at the open journal. He began to write again, but this time not about pain, not about the headlines, not even about Emily. He wrote about a boy in Chicago who dreamed of highways. He wrote about stars in New Mexico and a sunflower field that reminded him of light. He wrote about how trauma carves deep, but how silence can be sacred too. And he wrote about headlights, not as violations, but as beacons, a way to say, "I'm here, I'm coming through."
The next morning, Malik stood in front of the motel mirror, adjusting the strap on his backpack. He looked older, not in the way gray hair or wrinkles appear, but in the way someone looks after they've walked through fire and learned how not to run from it anymore. Emily was still sleeping. He left a note on the nightstand, a sketch of the open road, the turtle-shaped plant, and 2 stick figures under a sunflower sky. No words, just symbols. He knew she'd understand. As he stepped outside, the sky was overcast, but dry. He slid into the driver's seat. The map, now taped, patched, and folded into a new shape, rested on the passenger side. He didn't know where he was going. Not exactly. But he was ready to move. As the miles stretched behind him, Malik drove slower than usual. Not out of fear, but with intention. He wasn't chasing freedom anymore. He was redefining it. He passed by school buses and pickup trucks and rusted silos standing watch over empty fields. He saw old men drinking coffee on porches and women hanging laundry that danced in the breeze like prayer flags. Every so often, someone would wave, and sometimes he waved back. Somewhere in Tennessee, he stopped at a rest area and found himself sitting beside a man in his 60s, smoking under a tree. "You heading somewhere or running from something?" the man asked, flicking ash to the ground. Malik considered the question. "Maybe both, or neither." The man chuckled. "Ain't that life?" They sat in silence for a while. Then the man stood up, tipped his hat, and walked away. Malik stayed behind, staring at the distant road. That's when he saw her. Not Emily. Someone else. A young girl, maybe 17, walking alone with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and eyes full of storms. She reminded him of himself, of all the versions he used to be, all the ones he left behind on highways and hospital beds. He didn't say anything, just nodded as she passed. And she nodded back. Sometimes that's all it takes. A nod, a glance, a small confirmation that we are seen. That night,
Malik pulled into a quiet overlook. The stars had returned. Not as bright as New Mexico's, but they were there, scattered, patient, waiting. He sat on the hood of his SUV, journal in hand. His final entry that day read, "I used to believe the road would set me free. But freedom, I've learned, isn't the absence of fear. It's the courage to keep moving with it. America is a promise, and a wound, and a question. And I am all three. I am not healed, but I am still here."
Malik's story isn't wrapped up in a bow. There's no courtroom justice scene, no dramatic apology from the officers who hurt him. The system doesn't change overnight. America doesn't suddenly become the dream he once believed in. But that's the point. Because healing, especially for people like Malik, for anyone who's ever felt erased, profiled, or unseen, isn't a finish line. It's a process, a quiet, stubborn act of reclaiming space, of choosing to breathe deeply, even when the world makes it hard, of daring to be soft in a place that tries to harden you. And love? It didn't come to him with roses and candlelight. It came in the form of kindness, of someone sitting beside him in silence, of a crumpled map handed back like a second chance, of a small green plant that bloomed even when the light was scarce. Some say the American dream is broken. Maybe it is. But maybe, for people like Malik, the dream isn't about achieving perfection. Maybe it's about choosing to drive forward anyway, to rebuild, to resist, to love. To believe that the road, however dangerous, still leads somewhere worth going. So if you've ever felt like the world doesn't see you, if you've ever been broken, profiled, or told you don't belong, let Malik's story remind you, you are not alone. Your journey matters. Your voice matters. And even if the map is torn, the road is still yours to travel. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best touching stories start with honesty. The stories featured on this video are entirely fictional and created purely for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real events, secret government operations, or actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The story, characters, agencies, and incidents portrayed are entirely fictional. No identification with actual government agencies, military operations, or events is intended or should be inferred. Subscribe John's Stories channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day.